Hey folks, welcome to this impromptu live stream. I'm joined, as usual, by Artistic Layman, who's doing these excellent graphics, and a very stunned-looking stand-in Stan. How are you doing, brother?
I'm just fine. Thank you for having me.
So, if you don't know who Stand-in Stan is, I've actually been following him and his brother, Confused Matthew, since the internet was young. Confused Matthew did a lot of movie reviews, and Stand-in Stan helped him with a couple of those, thus the Stand-in Stan name. And you've also done stuff like you did an analysis of Jesus Camp, didn't you?
Yeah, I sure did. About 10 years ago.
And yeah, I agreed with everything you said in that, as I recall. But you know, all right, I wanted to launch the conversation. We're probably going to be discussing the manosphere, other sort of stuff like that, because you've been doing your own series, like these very short and pithy analyses of what you're seeing going on with them. Now, listen, Stan is he would consider himself more on the left, and yeah, I did a video I think about a year ago called something like the Western politics and the bicameral mind. And
okay, I didn't see that one. Yeah.
I like that one.
I'll check it out. Yeah.
What I was pointing out is that there's this. One of the things that it's extant in the scientific literature is people can get a brain injury to the is it the corpus callosum, something like that. It's the bit that connects the two hemispheres of the brain. And when the two hemispheres of the brain can no longer communicate, we are finding out that there's actually two people inside your head. That every so often, your left side and right side will have different opinions about things. And the right brain can't speak, so you can't hear what it says. It's kind of along for the ride. And it's mostly okay with that. Doesn't seem to hate the other side of the body, but every so often it has its own opinions. And it's just struck me with what's been happening to our politics, that the polarization, it's more than just polarization. It's a complete inability for people to communicate.
Well, I think that is more par for the course than we realize. I go back and watch old William F. Buckley videos and stuff from way back in the early 70s and in the 60s, and it was just the same, and people even use the same jargon. But I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about an inability to listen. This really is two sides who have chosen their champions, dug in, and that's kind of why I'm doing or trying to do what I'm doing on YouTube now, is that nobody is listening. Nobody really is making a good faith effort to communicate with each other. It's all labeling and demonizing people and not making a good faith effort to understand why people are saying what they're saying, why people are feeling what they're feeling. Even if you think they're wrong, at some level, there's a genuine motivation down there somewhere. Even the most hardened people that would say the most vitriolic things that I've seen on Reddit and Twitter and stuff like that, you would be amazed when these people feel that they're being listened to, how quickly that changes. And not being patronized or anything and not preaching to the choir, but when they feel that someone who isn't on their side is listening to them and relating to them, everything changes.
Part of the issue is we have a lot of bad actors. One thing I've been kind of kicked out of the alternative right because I kept warning them about who they were choosing to be their leaders and the tactics they were choosing and so on and so forth. I'm like, guys, this is not going to end well. And sure as hell enough, it did not end well. But they don't like hearing that. Yeah, in fact, I don't know if you know this. I'm sure you're familiar with the Charlottesville rally from last year, right?
Yeah, I remember that.
Do you know that there's still people in the alt-right that think it was a roaring success?
Did anybody with success of what?
I have no idea. Let's see.
What
you got one woman's dead. And yeah, okay, she's an asshole, but whatever. She's still dead. That's not good. You got several people arrested on the right, on our side, several people arrested, tons of people doxxed by the left and fired from their job. One guy actually committed suicide because of the doxing.
Well, and let's not, I mean, let's not forget it was a white supremacist rally, a real one. Like, you don't have to like try and paint it that way. A real one. Although, and yeah, I get what you're saying. I don't know what they think.
Well, it wasn't supposed to be. You know, the organizer of this was an Occupy Wall Street organizer 3 years before.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is the sort of stuff I've been saying to look out for. Like, here's what really just, it grinds my gears. The white supremacist thing is these guys are not white supremacists. They are just kids that don't know what the hell they're doing, and they want an identity. And they correctly notice that, you know, white guys tend to be, like, affirmative action is very opposed to white men specifically. You know, white guys are kind of no, we don't have a place for you in society anymore. They're angry, they're upset, and they're spouting a bunch of nonsense that they don't understand. None of them have read a book. None of them have a plan. None of them have victory conditions. They're just, the reason they're carrying tiki torches is not some sort of occult symbolism. It's because you can buy the damn things at Home Depot.
Sure. You said, I'm curious, you said something about white men, they don't have a place in society anymore. Do you think that that's an actual fact, or do you think that that's just felt by some of these people?
Oh no, that's that is an absolute statistical fact.
Oh wow, I don't feel that way. What tell me about that.
Look at hiring quotas.
Okay.
Look at university admission standards. There's a great story that a Hawaiian libertarian wrote about 5 years back. He was saying, like, back when he started working in the trades, you'd hire 15-year-old kids or 20-year-old kids to be your gopher, and you give them minimum wage, and they'd be learning the trade while they were being your gopher. These days, there's laws saying that you need to have so many women working for your company. And because very few women are in the trades, they're desperate to get them. And these women, because they don't have the same upper body strength, and because, quite frankly, women just don't, on average, have the same capacity to deal with three-dimensional puzzles that men do, these women are mostly doing the light work that the 20-year-old boys used to do. And so now the 20-year-old boys that want to go into the trades have to go pay several $1,000s to take a course instead of learning on the job. And when the jobs dry up, the company lays off the men first because the women are just so necessary to meet those government quotas.
Let me address a little bit of that. I would like to differ with you a little bit. Now this is, I'm more than willing to put a big asterisk over my head that reads results not typical. I can only speak for myself and from my experience. I've never experienced this in my life, and I've worked in many different kinds of industries. This just hasn't been a part of my experience. I've never worked for a place that had hiring quotas. I've never, at least that I knew about. I've never, when you talk about college admission standards, I can't speak to that because I never went to college, but my
bloody waste.
I don't know about that, but my wife went to college. There were tons of white guys. I don't know. The admission standards I can't speak to, but even if we let me accept for the sake of argument what you're saying here. Do you perceive this as an attempt to push white men into a place where they don't have a role in society as a sort of retribution for perceived ills of the past? Or do you perceive this as an attempt to try and correct for cyclical communities? It could be wrong either way, but or is it something else to your mind?
I don't think attributing it to a a bad actor is a very useful analysis. I mean, there are bad actors, but there's always bad actors. I mean, there's guys out there that abuse the patriarchy to treat their women like garbage. You always have bad actors. And it's more this. What I point out is that your young men are either going to continue building your civilization or they're going to destroy your civilization. If they don't do it actively by, running through the streets and burning things down, they're going to do it passively by switching off and going to porn and video games. And now you've got nobody left to defend the civilization. And we have this psychotic ideology of egalitarianism these days, that not equality of the soul. Okay, that has long been part of Western civilization. And it is truly one of the things that made Western civilization great, is that we respected all individuals as being equally worthy in the eyes of God. But now we want to push the equality, at the very minimum, equality of opportunity. We want to believe, like one of the things that just drives me up the wall is all the women in action movies these days, they weigh 120 pounds and they're beating up 5 guys that weigh more than I do. And it's like, no, ladies, I don't care how much martial arts you have. You could be a black belt in 3 different forms of martial arts. When some hulking thug comes up to you in an alley, pull out the pepper spray and run.
But if forgive me for this, I don't want to be, I'm not trying to be argumentative. I don't know about that, dude. I don't get the sense that movies are like projecting how people should be in real life. I don't know about that. I also don't know the average working class woman's general ability to defend themselves in real life. I mean, nobody really does any of that shit in real life except for I don't know, military. I don't know. I'm not sure about that, my dude.
Well, the thing is, I look at that and it's so ridiculous that it pulls me out of the movie. But keep in mind that your brain doesn't distinguish between watching a movie and things in real life. It puts all of those into your experience category. And so we have this belief that men and women are physically equal, or at least very, very close to one another, when the disparities in strength, in bone density are enormous. The disparities in mental abilities between men and women are very, very significant. There's a reason you don't see many female auto mechanics. I've heard some speculation that the male brain is larger than the female brain. And typically, when you compare across populations, people with larger brains have higher IQs. And yet men and women have pretty much the same IQ score. It might be a couple of points difference, but it's basically the same. And so I've seen some speculation that the larger male brain essentially contains a video graphics card in addition to everything else. And this is what makes men good at spatial reasoning, good at navigating, good at using tools and building things, is that we just have this extra component. And it doesn't really show up on IQ so much, but it certainly helps us. It's not sexism that was keeping women out of engineering. It was innate ability, and plus, in addition to that, innate disposition.
Well, you're touching on you're touching on something that I've said for a long time, is that women's liberation. Getting an echo.
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna F5.
Hello?
Oh yeah, you can keep going. He just has to reset himself.
Oh, okay. Oh gosh, what was I saying? The Industrial Revolution. Yeah, I mean, women's liberation, the political movement was very effective in terms of changing the public consciousness, but it didn't really change the fact. The women's liberation was helped majoritively by the Industrial Revolution. I mean, you had jobs that didn't require any physical labor whatsoever, virtually. But I get a little, I feel a little bit weird, if you'll allow me this. I feel a little bit weird when people talk about brain density and IQ and all this stuff, that this really look at all the people in the world and you don't see many women doing this and that and the other thing, I feel really weird thinking about my fellow people in that context, because in my day-to-day life, men and women, myself and every man that I know and every woman that I know and everybody else any otherwise is really just the same. We wake up in the morning, we look at our Facebook, we drive to work, we go to work, we worry about not being able to pay rent, we worry about the future. I'm not seeing this big difference in like our ability to live our lives and make a good future for ourselves. And the maybe you're talking about like differences in like aptitudes or something, but I don't think that.
Yeah, this is a great metaphor I came up with, trying to pound something into my brother's head. It did not stick in his head for more than 5 minutes, but I think you'll get what I'm saying. Imagine if you have an FPS game, right? And you've got two different weapons. One does slightly more damage per second. The other does slightly more damage per shot. The difference between these two guns is very negligible, but because of that very minor difference, one's going to be your sniper rifle, the other's going to be your machine gun. And if you iterate this over time, you're going to have, like, imagine the community starts making mods. They're going to make mods to make the machine gun an even better machine gun, and they're going to make mods to make the sniper rifle an even better sniper rifle. So even though these two guns are nearly identical, they are nearly interchangeable, they become specialized, and over time they become even more specialized. This is why with married couples, for instance, generally speaking, like men and women, like I'm a fairly clean guy, right? Like keeping my place clean. I have 2 coffee cups on my desk right now, so it's not that clean. But like one thing you find is most women, like if you live together, it will take her 30 minutes of being around a mess to say, that's too much, I need to clean this up. Whereas the guy, it will take 35 minutes. So if they were living apart, their apartments would be roughly as clean as one another. But when they live together, she does 95% of the cleaning because of such a minor little difference.
Okay, I'm only laughing because my wife and I, when you talk about the number of minutes that it takes until somebody notices a mess and cleans it up, for us it's probably like 100 billion. We just too exhausted at the end of the day to do anything about that shit. And maybe this is help me understand here. What is this in reference to, this thing about the sniper rifle and the thing? Is this about how we're supposed to organize like society in general, or is this about how people should behave or think about people individually? I'm not understanding the.
My point is that a very, very slight difference in aptitude can create a massive disparity in outcome.
Okay, but where are you seeing that disparity? Like okay, I'll give you an example. One of my jobs is a blue collar job. I basically work as a janitor. It's a little more technical than that. Let's call it a janitor for right now. It involves some heavy lifting and it involves a lot of like moving around and walking up and down stairs and carrying things and whatnot. And I work probably, there's probably just as many, if not more, women working there doing that job than men. And before we had this conversation, I never would have even noticed. We're all doing pretty much the same thing. We all know what the job is. It's not difficult to understand how to do the job. It's difficult to do at times, and you have to be adaptable and whatnot. But I've certainly never encountered, like, we have people coming, sometimes we hire temps and we have people coming in and out of there all the time. I have never once, and this is anecdotal, mind you, and I'm not thinking on this big macro level. I'm not sure how useful that is sometimes, but I've certainly, this is just from my experience, I've never noticed any real difference that stood out to me between the two. And obviously that's one job. I'm not sure how relevant this would be when you're talking about people who work at McDonald's. I'm not sure how. I'm not. I'll put it this way. I'm not 100% sure what you're getting at. Like, what is your what are you applying this to? Sure.
If you leave people alone and just kind of let civilization form organically, then you're going to have natural disparities. You know, between men and women will specialize Like they might start off innately, they're very, very close to one another. But you know what? If you're playing D&D, one guy has a strength of 18, one guy has a dex of 18. This guy with the strength 18 is going to be the meat shield. The guy with the dex is going to be the sniper. Even though they might, the other, like they're 16 on the other score. Like they're very close to one another, but they're different enough that they specialize. And what's been going on is there are massive social experiments being run out of this egalitarian ideology. For instance, the latest one is Bill Gates' wife is saying that there aren't enough women tech leaders. There aren't enough female CEO startups in Silicon Valley. And it's like, what the hell are you talking about? How do you know how many there should be? You know, like when you come to something like, when you come to very high level industry, such as CEO, tech startup, what have you, that's a 12-hour, 16-hour a day job doing that. You have to dedicate, you know, the first 35 years of your life to very, very intense work. And when women do that, their ovaries dry up. Now, this is what we're seeing these days. We're seeing all these women that have been, you know, they get a university degree, they get a grad degree, they go and work to pay off the bills, and now they have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in fertility treatments, and they have a couple of autism babies. You know, where areas, if you weren't manipulating the market with all of this ideologically based funding, with all this ideologically based legislating, most women are not, they would rather find a husband, you know, until you tell them from a young age that, you know, patriarchy is evil and husbands and wives, and you need to get a degree, you need to lean in, you need to go girl. And then they slave away for the corporations until 35, and they pay for that. Like a guy at 35 is still in really good shape. Okay, a woman at 35, her eggs are running out of time. By the way, we just had a super chat from
Yeah.
Exists in the human personality. We exhibit similar traits, but we also differ in others.
Well, I think so. This is kind of odd for me. So you're talking about a very macro societal. Your issue here isn't with. Let me organize my thoughts here. Your issue here seems to be that social experiment that you think that social experiment, it sounds like, is taking fundamental pillars of the way that society is set up, both naturally and through tradition, and throwing it away for something that may or may not work out because of these differences that you see in the. Is that a fair?
Yeah, that's an excellent summation. But in my individual life, I mean, like I don't know if you saw the image I have for the background right now. It's me and my girlfriend at the firing range, and I had to load her magazines for her. We're buying her a revolver. Okay, she doesn't quite have the grip strength to load 9mm rounds, but she knows how to shoot the gun. I trust her to drive. You know,
I've always said that the when people talk about gun control, I've always said that the best way to protect women in a society like this is to arm them. So yeah,
there was a great comment from the last psychiatrist. It was about there was this big thing about internet harassment on Twitter or whatever, and how they were going to ban anonymous accounts. Well, no. If you want to protect women, give the women anonymous accounts, because then nobody knows who the hell you are. Except the corporations do not want you to have an anonymous account. They want to know everything about you.
Sure, because they want to advertise to you. That's one of the things I was thinking the other day. I think I tweeted this the other day, that we were so scared for so long that Big Brother was going to take over, and it was going to be this like machine to propagandize us to follow like party doctrine or whatever. And it turns out they just wanted to sell us shit constantly sell us shit. Let me say to the point that you made about the social experiment or whatnot. I don't know, and I this is a genuine say. I don't know whether this is a social experiment or if it's just people thinking, hey, there's no reason not to encourage women to go into these fields, so let's encourage them. I don't know if it's one or the other.
Well, here's the thing.
Go ahead.
I just heard some ads on the radio recently about how we need more women in the trades. And it drove me up the wall because I love working in construction because there's no women there. So there's no drama. There's no sexual harassment suits. There's nothing. There's just guys getting a job done. But here's the thing. If you start an organization to get more women into the trades, the government will throw money at you. Doesn't matter whether you succeed or not, you're a millionaire.
How much money will they throw at you? Can I start one of these foundations? How much money do you get for doing this?
Oh, geez, ask Anita Sarkeesian. She's showing up at the UN for saying video games are sexist.
Yeah, but she was asked there by a person who had no idea who she was and had no idea that. Let me. Oh man, I actually have kind of a weird opinion about that. You're talking about that lady, and she was there with Zoe Quinn, right?
I listen. I think she's an admirable psychopath. She played the system and she made bank. Good for her.
I watched her Tropes versus Women series, and I don't get what the fuss is about. She literally didn't say anything. Did you see my video I made about that?
I might. It
doesn't. It's fine. It doesn't.
Out on the thing, honestly.
No, everybody was. I was late to the party. I'm late to the party on you. I'm late to the party on this. I don't know. I haven't been into this stuff for that long. When I was doing YouTube, before I started doing this a few months ago, the last time I had done YouTube, Bush was in the White House. So I was talking about the Iraq War. So this is one of the reasons. Oh, by the way, let me take this opportunity to tell my audience who is a little bit confused as why I'm here. One of the reasons is I'm trying to talk to a little bit more fiery, a little bit more controversial people who are on this side a little bit, just to kind of get a sense of where they're coming from. And this is one thing I promised myself I would say to my audience who's here. Corpse Grinder Fisher, the lead singer of Cannibal Corpse, he said of his band, and I'm pretty sure I'm quoting him exactly. He said, "We'll go on tour with Donna Summer. We'll fucking play anywhere." And my thing is, I'll fucking talk to anybody. So God, what was I saying? Oh, the Anita Sarkeesian thing. That wasn't okay. That wasn't like that. They weren't getting together to try and make a binding resolution on anything. That was just some lady. I don't think she knew who either of them were. She had to go looking for somebody to say what she already thought, and she found two people. That with all due respect and in all fairness, I don't think that's an example of how much money did Anita Sarkeesian?
That's what I'm saying, is that Anita Sarkeesian, her critiques actually weren't good they were very bland,
bland and inoffensive, I think.
But what they were is critiques. They weren't there.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't mean to interrupt. Let me give you a quick rundown of what I said in my video about that. So here's an example. Okay, Anita Sarkeesian points out that Bowser and Mario are fighting over a woman in the game, and that's a sexist trope. Okay, honestly, I never even considered that. That wasn't even in my consciousness. But yeah, you're right. They were. That's kind of messed up. Okay, point taken. Like, that's all. That's the maximum. Even if you're on board with what she's saying, that a shrug and a okay, that's the absolute maximum reaction that you can get today.
I'm gonna be really autistic for a sec. Maybe I'll get $150,000 for this. Mario fighting Bowser to win a woman is actually a very juvenile narrative, where the young 18-year-old boy sees his 18-year-old love interest dating the 25-year-old with a motorcycle, and he convinces himself that the 25-year-old is an evil man that's abusing her. When what he needs to do is stop blaming Bowser for being alpha. He needs to become Bowser. He's not going to get the princess by fighting Bowser. That's just a stupid fantasy that young men tell themselves. No, what he needs to do is become Bowser. That's an analysis.
With all due respect, I don't think that a shallow analysis even requires that much of a counter analysis. All you need to say, not you personally, but all anybody needs to say is, okay, point taken. Later.
Well, here's the thing.
That's all that needed to happen.
Her video series is like Das Kapital. Nobody actually reads Das Kapital. What they do is they say, look, we've got this big freaking book that shows that we're intellectuals. This proves it. Now listen to what we say.
Do people really do that? Oh, wow.
So Sarkeesian exists not because she says anything important, But because she is well-spoken, she has good graphics, and it's like, look, there's an official series pointing out that video games are sexist. We're going to bring this guest speaker to speak, but really we're trying to pass this legislation that is backed up by some moneyed interest. It's like, so she does not believe in feminism. Okay, she is not, like, her boyfriend was a true believer. Okay, he was smash the system, anarchy now.
I heard a little bit about this, yeah.
I
heard a little bit about him.
Yeah, I actually kind of feel, I almost like the guy because he really believes in what he's doing, even though he's evil as fuck. She's just the face. And so it doesn't matter what she says, as long as she says she's a feminist,
okay,
but she's an inoffensive feminist that our parents say, well, she seems like a nice-spoken young lady, and my son plays too many video games.
Here's something I here's a point that I really want to make about the tropes versus women thing, or not tropes versus, but about her, Anita Sarkeesian, period. I meant to say this in my video, and I can say it here, and I'm very glad that I can. I hear all the time that Anita Sarkeesian is like a female Jack Thompson, and guys,
no, Jack Thompson had morals.
Okay, but also, I think he had terrible. I don't think he had morals. I think he was terrible. Well, the reason I say she's not a female Jack Thompson is this is what got me when I actually watched that thing and was like, what is everybody making such a big deal about? Jack Thompson said that video games made boys killers, that they used video games to train to be killers, that the video games got into their heads and desensitized them in order to become killers, and that but for the fact that the Columbine killers played Doom, they would not have carried out that massacre. Anita Sarkeesian is not saying that video games make boys sexist. She actually never even came close to saying anything like that. It was and this is what I said in my video. What she said was so minuscule and tiny and just like these little microscopic, like, oh, here's something you might not have noticed. And this is what I said in my video too. We didn't get over the cultural we didn't get over like institutionalized racism and sexism by pointing out little things that you might not have noticed. You know what I mean? That kind of analysis, there's no there. No, she's not Jack Thompson. She is just nothing, irrelevant. Well, she's full of irrelevancies, whereas Jack Thompson was full of actual dangerous propaganda. That's all I wanted to say.
Listen, I'm gonna, if you're okay with that, I kind of want to move on from Sarkeesian because I think
sure.
largely agree. I want to actually, this is something, an analysis I did years ago. I wanted to say it partly for your audience because the left has been very critical of corporations, and like that's one thing that I don't know about the modern alternative internet right in general. I think a lot of us are, but I myself, I'm really not a fan of corporations. Mm-hmm. And I wrote this article titled Daddy Government and Corporate Boyfriend. And what I kind of see happening, and again, this is not some sort of evil master plan per se, it's more just a response to the market, is, you know, governments throw out, like governments promise women that they will protect women and the cops are always on call and, you know, we're not going to let you get raped. If he looks at you funny, that's date rape and all. Now, none of this stuff actually protects women from violent predators, but it gets votes. So you have daddy government that is always shoving his nose into your business saying, you better be treating my princess right, and the girls love that. Now, corporate boyfriend sets up an environment that every day she gets to go to a party where everybody's dressed really nice. And they have her Halloween, all the women are going to decorate the office, and corporate boyfriend takes the women out on dates, like fancy luncheons and whatnot, right? So she is, this kind of provides an environment for women where it's feeding, like the female instinct. You go hunter-gatherer times, okay? A woman wants to be part of a community and she wants to decorate things and she wants to know that there's going to be meat arriving, that she's safe and all of this, that daddy's protecting her and that there's a cool boyfriend that she's dating, that she has her tribe. And so what these corporations do is they they do an excellent job mimicking the tribal environment for the modern woman. And so women will they will slave for the corporation. They will work 12-hour days. They will put their own life on hold because emotionally, the people at the office become their tribe. And that goes on until there's downsizing. At the age of 40, she's let go. And I've seen this, older women bawling their eyes out when the company, this office closes, even though they're getting 6 months paid leave afterwards. They're bawling their eyes out because it wasn't a job for them, it was a society. But when a woman gets laid off, you're not part of that society anymore. This was just to extract money out of you. And it was to extract taxes out of you. And it was to get you to spend money on consumer crap that you don't need and doesn't actually make your life any better. It's just this treadmill that it keeps the votes flowing, it keeps the taxes flowing, and it keeps people buying useless crap from the mall.
I don't understand what the treadmill. I'm a little confused about that. I'm not used to thinking about like, I'm not used to thinking of like the government tells women these things and then the corporations.
The politicians are just out for votes.
Okay, but does the government really tell women we'll protect you? I don't what I'm not getting that message from anything that I'm seeing out of the government. For me, the government's usually saying like we'll pay down the national debt or something, is the usual bullshit. This is a blind spot for me. I'm not seeing that.
Okay, an example of this would be the affirmative consent laws. That it's been passed, it's actually policy now in California. College campuses it started on college campuses. So this isn't law, it's just the policies and procedures of the college campus. It's gone on to become law in California. I think, one of the Norwegian countries has passed it into law, or they're passing it into law right now. And now, what affirmative consent is, it's this completely autistic form of consent. It actually comes from the BDSM community, where you have to get consent for everything. I'm
familiar with this, yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Totally familiar with that BDSM part. Mm-hmm.
That's not how it works. That's people.
Okay, go ahead.
Now, this is a very comforting law to women because it says to women that, if girl, he can't do that to you. If he do that to you, we put him in jail. But it doesn't actually stop them. It doesn't undo whatever happened.
Might this be now? Let me get maybe just a little alternative way of looking at this, because this sounds to me like liability mitigation. Couldn't this just be a means of having some mechanism to ameliorate cases where there's where the consent wasn't perceived to have been given, and you have to have some mechanism to deal with that? I don't get. I can see many different reasons why that kind of legislation might be passed, other than we're virtue signaling for women votes. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, the initial activists are psychotic. I mean, again,
maybe this is a good point to make here. I'm not sure that kind of affirmative consent, the way that you described it to me, I'm not sure that that's altogether bad. I think that the more how do I phrase this? I think that the more informed we are in our dealings with each other, especially in a situation where it's like two people who are dating or whatever, I think that's probably good. Am I off base there?
Well, affirmative consent would mean that if she's had one beer, she can no longer consent, and it's rape.
Oh, well, that's not. Oh, okay. Well, that's kind of dumb.
Yeah, and it would, if she never explicitly said yes. Listen, I used to be a terrible degenerate, and I'll tell you the number one sign that a woman's going to have sex with you tonight is she says to you, "I'm not going to have sex with you." When she says it uncalled for in the middle of the conversation, that means she's thinking about having sex with you, and she's going to have sex with you if you don't screw it up.
Okay, it's been a long time since I've been.
Yeah, I mean, these millennials might be too autistic, but it's.
I had a totally different. Oh, can I respond to a comment here for a second?
Please do.
Somebody said somebody said the government speaks through its laws. I don't think they do. I think they speak through their ad campaigns. I don't think people. This is one of the reasons that I'm having such a hard time getting on board with what you're saying, is that I don't think that people, men or women, generally know or give a shit, even in their subconscious. Oh, the government passed this law and this makes me feel really good about the government. I think that most people, male or female, this might be an economic thing. I'm poor. I've always been poor. Poor people to me seem to be a little bit more down to earth than some other people in economic brackets, but I don't think that the average man or a woman sees the government as anything other than this pain in the ass thing that taxes them and drives up their mortgages and whatnot, if that's fair to say.
Let me give you another example. And I'm going to be using specifically my jurisdiction, but you're going to find very similar stuff. It was originally invented by Americans. It's basically the same everywhere. It's just slightly different. So here in Canada, the domestic violence policy has two aspects. The first is the primary aggressor, the doctrine, the Duluth model, and the second is no drop prosecution, zero tolerance. So the Duluth model says that because the goal of the Duluth model is to prevent death, to prevent murders from happening. So anytime that there's domestic violence, anytime the cops are called for domestic violence, they have to arrest somebody. They can't show up and say, oh, it's just an argument that got out of hand and then leave. They have to arrest somebody. The idea being that if they're feeling murderous, they'll chill out and cool down while they're sitting in prison for a couple of days. Now, the person arrested is the primary aggressor. Now, the definition of primary aggressor is not the person that started the fight. It's not the person continuing the fight. It's the person most capable of inflicting violence, which 99% of the time is the man because he's bigger. There are cases where the cops show up because the husband called and the husband has stab wounds, and they take the husband to the hospital and then put the cuffs on him because he's the primary aggressor.
Right.
And this is followed up by the no drop prosecution. So every domestic violence incident is going to be prosecuted. Now, when you're prosecuting every single one, the government doesn't want to put people in prison. That's a waste of money. What they do instead is get you to plea bargain, you get some community service, and now you have a criminal record. Perfect. We got this cocksucker by the short hairs. In other words, if you're a man and you have a woman that's beating the crap out of you, and by the way, I'm speaking from personal experience here, and if you call the cops or if anybody calls the cops, you are going to be arrested, and you're either going to get a permanent criminal record that prevents you leaving the country, or you're going to spend $10,000 proving your innocence.
Okay.
And there's a lot of people benefiting from that. You know, there's a lot of people making a payday off of that with no interest in doing what's right or what's just.
It's hard for me to wrap my head around that there would be a deliberate conspiracy is too strong a word, but you know what I mean, a deliberate sort of plan of action to set up that scenario where exactly what you just said, that somebody somewhere did that deliberately so that they can have this money cycle and all that.
Listen, Duluth, the guy that came up with this model and proposed that we arrest people to make sure, he actually renounced the model because what he found is that locking a guy up for a couple of days actually pisses him off more and it increases the murder rate.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So he's renounced it, but his model is really useful. And I'm serious, man. Never underestimate the amount of human complacency and just plain evil There are a lot of evil people.
Oh no, I just don't think they'd leave that much to chance. Like there, you would have to have this very specific thing happening, and then I don't know. That seems I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying this doesn't happen. Obviously it does, but it's the why it's happening that I think I'm just having a hard time.
I don't.
Well, again, these come from complex roots. The thing is, there are a lot of millionaires funding this ideology. Cultural Marxism is a real force, and part of what they want to do to get us to the point where they can build the cultural utopia is to destroy all the pillars of our civilization. You know, like when the working class didn't revolt against the capitalists, when instead we got better treatment of the working class, the Marxists went and looked at it and said, you know what? We're not going to get this worldwide revolution by looking at classes. Classes were the wrong bet. What we need to do is destroy all the institutions that keep society stable. The church, the family, you name it. And if we destroy those and we instill chaos, then people are malleable. In Rules for Radicals, Alinsky writes that if you want people to fight for your cause, make them as miserable as possible. If they're poor, if they're desperate, if their societies are broken, they will be angry enough to fight for your cause. You know, you could almost wonder if Richard Spencer's read that book.
I don't know, but when you say this is where you can really help me, because I want to I hear this a lot. What do people mean when they say cultural Marxism? Because I know a lot about Marxism, and I've read the Communist Manifesto hundreds of times and have dissected it hundreds of times, but I don't know what Marxism could mean in the context of the culture. Like, what are the cultural means of production, and how do you? I don't explain that to me if you could.
If I may have a chance to give my input. It's kind of an implicit, in my own younger life, it's kind of this implicit assumption about how culture is supposed to go. The ultimate implicit assumption that society is supposed to progress in a particular direction. And this is actually in line with Marxist thought, the idea that society just naturally progresses from a capitalist society to a social society. And to go back to the whole political concept, when I was blue-pilled, if you will, regardless of whether I was on the left or on the right, there was always this implicit assumption that the government was the central source of all social change, which is why people like me get so nervous and so excited around election time, because you think you're deciding the future of the country.
See, the government is the source of social change, huh?
I would, okay, to try and explain cultural Marxism, you have to start with some very damaged and broken people. I would say my basic definition of mental health is when like a good person doesn't want to tell everybody else how to live their life. They don't want to force everybody. They don't believe that they have the perfect plan, that if everybody follows it, things will be beautiful. And if you don't follow it, we'll fucking kill you because you're preventing utopia.
Sure.
And it's usually like, again, I don't want to go ad hominem, but when you look at the leaders of these movements, there's just something so obviously broken about them. The feminists, when you look at the leading feminist voices out there, like the true believer feminists, they are so wretchedly ugly, so sexually dysfunctional that, of course, they hate men. No good-looking man will talk to her, and she's angry and bitter about that.
Well, that's mostly anecdotal evidence that we often give, which is reinforces this position. But I'm actually reminded of this one little segment that it kind of explains how it's not because we're not saying that every single person on the left is involved in this great conspiracy, but it just means this.
No audio.
And in journalism school, I can tell you outright, it's not some Darth Soros conspiracy to mind fuck the millennials. It's merely a function of the absolute, unerring uniformity of East Coast cunt flap opinion that every goddamn journalist under the yellow sun just happens to simultaneously ascribe to, which in my eyes is infinitely more insidious than an actual conspiracy.
See, if we talk about the cultural Marxists, it's the... All right, what is the school, Luke? It's, I want to say Austrian, but that's Austrian economics. Frankfurt, thank you. I knew it was German. So the Frankfurt School of Cultural Marxists, in the 20s and 30s, These guys were sitting around because Marx had been predicting that there would be this global revolution when the workers throw off their chains and we're going to all own property in common and we're all going to be equal and everything will be beautiful because we're all equal and nobody owns property. That will be we'll be back in the Garden of Eden. Well, these Frankfurt School guys were looking at what had been happening since Marx's time. Marx was pointing out some major abuses that were happening with the early industrial period, but those abuses were largely healed by the 1920s. You know, workers had more rights. The government, like people in governments, had cracked down on the robber barons, and so suddenly the working class and the middle class, they were pretty comfy. It's like, yeah, I might not have an ivory back scratcher, but, you know, I got my own car and I got a doghouse. What the hell? Why would I revolt against anything? So the cultural Marxists started looking at what are the institutions that keep people happy? What are the institutions that keep people participating in society? And those institutions are things like marriage. When 90% of the men can find a woman to marry them, they are going to be very happy and more interested in stability than overthrowing society. And likewise, women that have found a good man and they're raising children, they're too damn busy raising their kids to start worrying about gender equality in the workplace. They don't give a shit about that. They have kids to take care of. They have lives. They don't have time to be political. The church is another major aspect. You know, certainly Marx described as the opiate of the masses. I would argue that religion is so foundational to humanity that you don't get rid of it. And they identified other aspects, other things that were keeping people happy, that were keeping people obedient to the evil capitalist overlords, etc. And their conclusion was that if we're going to have the communist revolution, we need to smash the pillars of society. We need to drag society down into poverty, because only then can we overthrow things. And then we can institute our system, and in our system, everything's going to be perfect, just like communist Russia.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that a cultural Marxism would be a well, geez, I'm still not getting the Marxism part, but I get what you're saying. It sounds like you're saying that they're strategy.
They are utopians. That's the thing. Marx was a utopian.
Okay, but it seems to me that the reason I get so weird about this is that Marx was saying that basically labor was producing all the capital, but ownership, who didn't work, was taking all the profits from the capital. So basically, since it was a collective effort anyway, it should be collectively owned, which was completely ludicrous, because there's a totally better way to do it. But like, I get so hung up on that part of the manifesto, because that's where it was deadly and that's where it utterly failed. Marx said that if you eliminate private property and accumulate the means of production in the hands of a large Politburo
or whatever.
Oh gosh, he said I can't think of the word. A big society of workers. Basically, the working class, he said, wasn't trying to just he called government a committee for managing the affairs of the wealthy. And he said that the working class were just trying to work and get what they were owed, basically. And he said they were owed it because they were producing it, not because it's fairness or anything like that. It's just because they were the ones who were making all the capital. And he said once capital was distributed to a large association, that's the word he used, association of workers, basically everybody, that's what communism is, it would cease to have a political character. That will never have. That's why you saw despots crop up everywhere that this was tried. Man is a political animal. We will never have a non-political leadership institute. Mm-hmm.
You know, what they're trying to do with cultural Marxism is, man is a political animal. My interests, like, I care more about my dog than I care about strangers halfway around the world, because I don't know those strangers. I can't do anything for them, but I can take care of my dog. I'm more interested in my family than in strangers. We are all products of a certain cultural background, and we are going to identify with that culture, and we're going to love our culture and see that. So they're trying to do the same thing there, where instead of capital, it's identity. If they can just eliminate all group identity, identity through religion, through culture, through family, through neighborhood, through community, if we can all just become interchangeable cogs, things will be perfect.
That may be. Let me accept that for the sake of argument. The reason I get so hung up on this because I've heard a little bit of this stuff. You're rounding it out for me better than it has been before. But the reason I get so hung up on this is that I don't think that we have a uniform culture anywhere. I think that if you go to Berkeley, right, and you hang out in Berkeley for 2 weeks, and then you go and hang out in San Antonio for 2 weeks, it's the same country under the same constitution with the same, ostensibly the same American culture. You're going to have radically different experiences in those two places. I don't think that there's a. I'll put it this way. I don't think that culture is monolithic enough for them to be able to do with the culture what Marx wanted to do with capital. And I don't think that it can be done, and I don't think it's being done, because but for the fact that we all have radically different experiences in exactly the same country. I'm sure you're in Canada, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm sure this is even true in Canada. I mean, if you go to like the difference between, I don't know, I don't know anything about Canada or geography, but if you go to like someone from like Prince Edward Island and someone from Alberta and then someone from Quebec or whatever, you probably get exactly the same kinds of differences. I don't think if there is a group out there that's trying to do this, I don't think right now, this is you're getting the unprocessed ore of my thoughts, because I'm a little bit new to this, but if you will, if there's a group out there that's trying to do this, there's no way that they can be successful. They're not in reality. Culture doesn't work that way.
And I agree. They will never actually succeed. But in the meantime, like what these are people with chips on their shoulders. They feel like they're an outsider and they're angry at the world. I mean, like every single one of us, back when we were 17, 20 years old, we had a lot of angst, and we're very, it's like, the world's so conformist, man. It's full of crypto fascists.
Yeah, sure. These
people are 60 years old and they get $100,000 a year from the university, and they still feel like that.
I don't think they have any influence. That's what I'm saying. I don't think they have any influence. I don't think that the average person knows about any of this stuff. I don't think that the average, again, I'm going to make a big caveat here. One of these commenters said, man, this guy needs to read more. And maybe that's true.
Nice commenters.
No. That wasn't unkind. That wasn't unkind. He thinks I need to get up on this stuff a little bit more. That's what I'm trying to do. But thank you. No, I'm, like I said, I'm poor. I've always been poor. I know poor people. I know I have known rich people. I've lived with rich people. I've had a really, really weird variety of experiences for someone who's as kind of limited in his geographical scope as I am. But I have never... Oh, here's something that may surprise you, and I swear on my life this is true. I have never in my life, to my knowledge, met a feminist. Ever. Not one.
Have you met a woman that's had casual sex before marriage?
Yeah.
That's a feminist. But they don't even know they're feminists at this point.
What's wrong with having casual sex before marriage?
Oh, where do we begin with that one?
Uh-oh. We might have a disagreement here.
There's actually a lot of... Yeah, I mean, it's scientific evidence, and I don't put much stock in science these days, but there's quite a bit of damage that happens from it.
Well, okay, go ahead.
Well, there's microchimeralism, first of all, that when sperm is deposited inside of a woman, it permanently stays in her. Okay, it actually affects her genetically. Now, this is still very tentative. We don't know how much, but it's there. There's the fact that the number of prior partners a woman has is correlated to her likelihood of divorce. There's single motherhood. which results from this, which is extremely expensive, creates damaged people. It's just terrible for society. When women are sleeping around, 80% of the women tend to pursue 20% of the guys, leaving 80% of the guys, you know, in that whole incel category. So all of a sudden, these guys that aren't getting laid, what motivation do they have to work hard and participate in society? You know, and the women, when women sleep around, it wears on them. It really wears on them. There's a saying in the manosphere called the 1,000-cock stare. You know, like when some women that have just slept around enough, they get to the point they just have dead lights in their eyes. They are no longer capable of love. And it's heartbreaking.
Here's one of my favorite statistics right here about multiple partners. Like in this image right here that's been reviewed by Stefan Molyneux, a woman who has no extra sexual partners before marriage is only at 80% chance of having a stable marriage, and a woman who has more than one, has just one sexual partner, that cuts down to 53. Like the possibility of having a stable marriage cuts down to 53%.
And you know what? When you're 60 years old, having a stable marriage is a lot better than having a collection of dildos.
Well, listen, I'm a family man, right? I'm married.
I know.
Sure. No, but what I'm saying here, I want to know how this affects their ability to form a healthy relationship. I want to know why they were doing this in the first place. I think that's a part of the statistics that I haven't really seen. I don't know if anybody's asked that question. Here's where I'm coming from.
Actually, I heard a great saying for this is that men will sleep down but marry up. In that guys, if they're drunk or if they're just, it's been a while or whatever it might be, they will go dumpster dive and sleep with some chick that they would never, ever consider introducing to their friends or family.
Okay. I can't.
These women that get dumpster dived have now raised their standards. Like they're a 4 out of 10, and an 8 out of 10 just slept with them.
But a 4 out of 10. Okay, but a 4 out of 10 in what though? Like here's what I mean. Let me give you an example. Maybe this will give you an idea of sort of where my mental apparatus goes when I think about people's pasts and sexual experiences and whatnot. I think that it is very important for a young person who aspires to fall in love and marry and settle down someday and have a family. I think it's very important to a successful marriage in the future to know what you don't want. And you can't really get that without experience. I certainly couldn't have. And both me and my wife had, when it comes to partners and sexual activity.
Oh, yeah, my woman was no virgin.
Oh, sure. We'll just say
on her wedding day.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's healthy. With the two of us, I'll just say we didn't do too badly. Okay, I'll leave it at that. And
I'll put this out that I'm the most alpha guy she's dated.
Okay. Well, we have a reverse dichotomy, Davis. I'm probably the most beta guy she's dated.
I don't know. You got a lot of solidity in you. You got a soul of iron.
Wow, thank you. I'm flattered. But here's my point though. Here's where I'm going with this. I've had terrible relationships. I've been in physically abusive relationships. I've been in emotionally abusive relationships. As I said in one of my most recent videos, my very first ever girlfriend was a 23-year-old woman when I was 14. And I will just leave to your imagination what the legal problems with that and all that kind of stuff. So yes, it's probably happened to me, whatever it is that you can imagine that they say this happens to guys too, kind of thing, right? I've to quote New Order, my life ain't no holiday. I've been through the point of no return. I've seen what the man can do, and I've seen all the hate of the woman too. I've done that. But that process of, and obviously people aren't going to usually have the same kind of extreme experiences that I have, but that process of bad relationship, bad experience, I thought this was going to work out, but it didn't. Those stepping stones are a sort of process of elimination. This is one of the things that I was impressed with the MGTOWs about. They kind of get this in a different way than I do. It really is sort of a process of elimination. And I think that it's important if you desire to have a healthy, rewarding relationship in the future, It's not going to be your first one. It's probably not going to be your second one. And you're not going to know what you're all about sexually, emotionally, or in any other way until you've gone and tested it. In that sense, I think that frivolity is too strong a word, but you know what I mean. I think that a healthy exploration in the past can and has, in my experience personally, and in everybody that I know that has what I would consider to be a successful marriage today, has done this. I think that's I think that is a very necessary component of healthy relationships in the future, if that's fair to say.
See, I disagree. I'm just going to point out what's been happening over the past 50 years is that promiscuity keeps ramping up. So there's a saying, I don't know if I came up with this or not, but it's like the baby boomers destroyed marriage, right? So they 50% of them got divorced. Who gives a shit? The Gen Xers destroyed dating. And now at this point, the millennials have destroyed sex. So these days we have such rampant promiscuity that, I've got some speculation out there. It is speculation, but I'm going to wager that about 50% of the women in this generation, 50% of the women in their 20s right now, are never going to reproduce. Some of them because they caught STDs enough times that they're infertile. Others because they will never be able to pair bond with a man because they were rode rough and hung up dry. And also I'm going to extend this. There's going to be a lot of women that have 1 or 2 children, but raise them in such terrible environments that those children become infertile. That they turn into trannies or they are autistic or what have you. Like what we are seeing, massive dropping fertility rates. The average woman these days in Western countries has about 1.7 children.
If you don't mind me jumping, have you ever seen Idiocracy?
This is one of the worst parts is that the stupid people are having the most babies.
Well, of course.
Idiocracy is brilliant. I love that movie.
My brother made a great point. He said that Idiocracy is what liberals are afraid conservatives are going to build as a society. And what the fuck was that? What was that Stallone movie? Demolition Man is the society that conservatives are afraid liberals are going to make in the future. I thought that was
living in both right now.
I thought that was a great point. Let me address something you just said. Could it be when it comes to this whole like early sexual promiscuity thing? I don't know if promiscuity is the right word, but could it be that these early sexual encounters and stuff by the way, I also think that people should get married later. I got married when I was 29. Was I 29? Was 29 or 30? Anyway, I got married later in life. Adolescence has kind of moved into the 20s as the way I see it anyway, as our life expectancies expand. And you can see this happening throughout. As our life expectancies have expanded throughout history, childhood and adolescence get later and later, just as a function of how much longer we live and how much more time we have to develop early on. Could it be that this isn't because of the sex, but could it be that it's because we've become really materialistic in the philosophical sense? Like there's only matter and brains and bodies, and we're going like, oh, she's got big tits and he's got money and I want big tits and I want money and all this stuff, and we're not looking for love interests anymore. We're looking for these really practical things later in our lives that are really calculated in this weird sort of what's the best like scientific coupling kind of thing. You see what I'm getting at a little bit?
This is one of the big things that I harp on is that, well, to put it, this might be too simple a way to put it, but we've abandoned God. This is what Nietzsche was trying to point out in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, that we've killed God. God is dead and we have killed him. That in the 18th century, we abandoned God and just started believing in ourselves, in materialism. One of the ways I describe it is the great god Leviathan. We have built a mechanical God for us, and it just needs the blood of millions to operate. This is, we believe in our own reason. We believe that we can we can reason our way out. We have abandoned virtue. We have abandoned absolute truth because we prefer our own truth. And
well, that's an interesting way to put it. I can that resonates with me a little bit. With my wife and I's experience was, as I said, she and I had been through very, very almost identical those stepping stones that I talked about before. And one of the things that we did almost 10 years ago now is said, fuck this, fuck these idiots, fuck what anybody thinks. And my deal was, this is what I want for my life. This is how I want my life to look. This is how I want my family to look. I don't really have ever given a fuck what anybody thinks I should be doing. I'm going to stand or fall by it, and therefore it's going to be the way that we want it to be. And if what you're telling me is that there's this big culture now where people are trying to what's the word I'm looking for? They're trying to
maximize their hedons, their hedonism. They're trying to get the most for the least. There's a guy, Common Filth, he put it really well, that the whole pickup and dating market these days is privatizing the profits and socializing the costs. I get the privatized profit of getting my dick wet, and somebody else has to deal with the damaged woman in the future. She's not my problem anymore.
I wonder if people are there any in the comments here, the people watching this, are there any 18 to 25s here? I wonder if they would identify with that. I wonder what they would have to say, because I'm so far from that age now I want to kill myself. But I wonder if they would. I wonder if somebody put that to them, if they would agree with that, if they would go, huh, I didn't think about it that way. But yeah, I do kind of feel like that. I would really wonder what they would have to say about that. I wonder if they're really, because again, I can only, and somebody got on me in the comments about, oh, this guy thinks his life experience reflects reality. No, I don't. I just think that it would have gotten to me somehow. Maybe I'm wrong about that too. I think it would have gotten to me somehow if this were the case. I haven't experienced and again, maybe this is just an economic thing. I work my blue collar job that I work at. I work with millennials. I work with the 18 to 25s. Three of these kids were 18 when I got in there, and I hadn't known anybody that age since I was that age. And all I had heard about these people was that they are narcissists who are constantly looking at a picture of themselves on Facebook and just always on their phones and always thinking about themselves and talking about themselves and all this stuff. And I got into this environment, and these kids were curious. They were constantly asking questions. This really impressed me about them. They were constantly asking questions. They were constantly talking to each other about things that had happened to them over the weekend and stuff. They were constantly making eye contact with each other and interacting with each other. The only narcissist on Facebook during lunch breaks and whatnot is myself, because I'm fucking tired and I can't be bothered to go talk to anybody. But they're curious about things. This is one thing I notice about these kids too. They seem to be really curious about things. They want to know what is really going on. What is this really? I read this thing on Facebook. Is this real? What does this really mean? That it really impressed me. My generation, when I was a teenager, I don't remember any of us really giving a shit about anything like that. So again, it is my personal experience, and it is just my subjective view.
I think part of it's because you're working an honest job. When you work with your hands, it's hard to believe in bullshit, right? Because every day it's like, and it's just a janitorial or whatever.
Yeah,
but basically, you go do an 8-hour shift. The place started out messy. Now it's clean, and you recognize that somebody needs to clean things. Somebody needs to maintain the roads. Somebody like they're.
You know what? I'm so sorry to interrupt you, David. Can I tell you? I have confirmation of what you're saying by a friend of mine, who, she was a college graduate and she worked with nothing. God, I can't believe this just popped into my head. You're so right about this. She was a college graduate. She worked with nothing but white collar college graduates in like a government office or something. And I had just gotten done saying, oh, these kids they're so intuitive and they're so smart and they're so curious. And she is looking at me like I've got lobsters crawling out of my ears. She's like, what are you talking about? These kids, they want praise and adulation for doing just basic things that you're just expected to do on the job, and they're all constantly asking for time off to go party and blah blah blah. And man, two completely different experiences within the state. You see what I mean about no monoliths? Two very different, and this is independent confirmation.
This is why I love working in construction, by the way. It's just, and you know, there are a few chicks in construction. But I hate the affirmative action because I don't want to see the girls that come in with affirmative action. All right, the girls that are already there, they're working the damn job. Very few of them dress sexy on the job because they're smart enough to realize that there's going to be some asshole that's going to take a picture of their ass if they walk around wearing tight pants. And it's like, honey, just dress like a construction worker. Dress like a pile of shit and nobody will sexually harass you. Okay, I'm not saying it's okay to sexually harass women. What I'm saying is if you don't want to get sexually harassed, don't be sexy and you won't get sexually harassed.
Oh, man, I can't do that. I can't do that. I'm stuck in a life of being sexually harassed, dude. Sorry.
But yeah, it's like I don't mind the construction right now because they're down to earth. But as soon as you start making it the cool thing, as soon as you start marketing it, the idiots come in. And yeah, that's one of the nice things about blue collar or like anything that's like engineering is pretty good for it, actually. You know, anything that actually has concrete results, you get people that have concrete minds.
I think, yeah, I think there's something to be said for the economic environment that people grow up in and the kinds of things that they're forced to be concerned with over other things because of their economic circumstances. And that's one of the things, you know, man, there's a lot of depressed rich people. You know what I'm saying? I find that my life is very rewarding, and I'm very poor, and I'm constantly stressed out about money. But my life is very rewarding. I'm often depressed. I have just a plethora of mental problems and whatnot. But yeah, I think that this just got me thinking about the whole class envy thing about rich people and the way that we idolize the wealthy and people who have a lot of things. A lot of them are pretty miserable, right? It's
well, you know what? Again, before the show, I was was this during the show or before the show? I forget. But when I look at the people that show up to Richard Spencer's rally, and I look at the people opposing them, I'm seeing the same people essentially. These are people that they are misfits because society has no useful role for them, right? Or, you know, with the radical left, the useful role is you guys go out into the street and scream a lot because there's a law we want to pass. You know, and the law that gets passed does not help the environment, doesn't help women, it just helps some corporate interest. And, you know, the people that show up for these alt-right rallies, it's more about ego than financial profit with them. Although I do suspect, there's some backroom pool I know about. There's a lot of people getting funding from very questionable sources. But it's more about ego. It's like, you know, come show up at my rally and this will benefit my ego. But these are misfits with no identity, no meaningful. You know what? I'm going to finish this off and then read this comment. I think the reason society should exist, I think the main purpose of civilization is to create moral excellence in people, not to build like China economy strong, building the greatest economy the world has ever seen, not to pacify the populace so they don't rebel, pacify them with pornography and make work jobs. I believe moral excellence is why civilization should exist. And if it abandons that, civilization falls. And so just let me read this super chat quickly. Krillin876 says, Aurini, if you are super busy at work and a millennial worker can't figure out 10% of 100, is it okay if I mansplain? No, dude, mansplaining is hate speech. Why do you hate women? Maybe you're gay. Maybe you're gay. That's why you're trying to mansplain. Just try it for the other team, dude. Maybe you'll find something you like. Anyway, Stan.
I don't know what mansplaining means. Let me give you real quick. You were talking about oh God, what was the last thing you said? I had it right on the tip of my
moral
tongue.
excellence, that society.
Moral excellence. Okay, let me give you an Adler quote here. Mortimer Adler is my favorite philosopher. Him and Bob Hutchins canonized the great books of the Western world that were summarily dismissed as being Eurocentric and all of that stuff. And it's really not for that reason. I'll get into what the reason was in a moment. But he said, he was talking about, there's an interview, and I'm going to quote him verbatim. I do this a lot. But gave an interview, and God, I want to say it was 58 or 59, right after Sputnik. And the Russians, this is the point where the Russians looked like they were going to steamroll the United States in terms of technology and all that stuff. And the question he was being asked was, there's Adler right there. I see him on the screen. That's my boy. Philosophy is everybody's business. But he was asked a question about what's going on. Why is Russia so much? What are they doing that's making them so much more technologically superior than us? And Adler gave a very interesting answer. He said that the failure in the United States when it came to education goes much further than us not being able to do something like Sputnik. He said, what is Russia doing that's so special? He said, are they educating their citizenry to become wise men or free men? No, he said they are educating them to become useful technicians. He said, if we adopt the Russian model, we too could create a class of useful technicians, but we would not have an educated citizenry that was wise and free and fulfilled and happy. I urge you to check this guy out. He wrote him and Bob Hutchins wrote volumes on education reform, getting rid of the university system. At Columbia, when he ran it, he got rid of professors 100%. Every single person at Columbia had the same title. It was fellow and tutor of the college, and everybody taught the whole program. There were no electives. There were no special. Anyway, I'm blabbering now. But
this goes back to how we started things off, talking about the lack of communication between the left and the right.
Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody mentioned the Capitalist Manifesto. Catacon. Good man. The very, very good book. Go ahead. Sorry.
One thing that frustrates me so much is that I think there is a lot of potential for meaningful conversation about all of this. Because you're mentioning education. I want to get into a whole side topic about the Prussian education system and how it was designed to teach obedience, not education. And like my frustration with this world is that people are being they are being dumbed down. They are being placated. They are being opiated with soy, high fructose corn syrup, McJobs, with pointless education, with usurious debt slavery from your student loans, with the corporations, like, buy these jeans. Look, there's a chick with a fat ass wearing these jeans. If you don't buy our jeans, nobody will have sex with you. And it's like it is so damn frustrating. Now, I strongly advocate for tradition exists for a good goddamn reason, because it worked for thousands of years. That doesn't mean that we just blindly, like what you were saying about the left thinks that the right wants to create a theocracy. I hate Walmart. I love the free market. I hate Walmart. I will not shop there if I can possibly avoid it. There's so much grounds for communication and experimentation.
Mm-hmm.
Experimentation. What we have now is, increasingly, we have a system where everything that's not explicitly permitted is forbidden, and everything that's permitted is mandatory.
And once again, I'm greatly reminded of a clip from the Screw Tape Letters.
Please do.
For democracy, or the democratic spirit, diabolical sense, leads to a nation without great men, a nation mainly of subliterates, full of the cocksureness which flattery breeds on ignorance, and quick to snarl and whimper at the first hint of criticism. And that is what hell wishes every democratic people to be. For when such a nation meets in conflict, a nation where children are being made to work at school, where talent is placed in high posts, and where the ignorant mass are allowed no say at all in public affairs, only one result is possible. The democracies were surprised lately when they found that Russia had got ahead of them in science.
You know, it's like on the one hand, yeah, I want a system where we actually educate people. I think the classics need to be taught, you know, that people need real culture. At the same time, we've gone to this other extreme where everybody is this little, you know, this little emperor, this little, you know, philosopher, and nobody knows how to do anything useful.
Well, let me make a point about that. Adler's philosophy. Adler's headline that he used everywhere was "Philosophy is everybody's business," and what he meant by that was, in the since the 1920s onward, he maintained there wasn't a single book on philosophy written for the layman, the lay people. Everything was this elite professors of philosophy writing to each other and all of this really in-depth stuff, and people thought of philosophy
as philosophy or the history curriculum.
Philosophy.
Was he describing the modern literature field, or was
no he was talking about
philosophy?
What's that?
It was philosophy, right.
Well, Aristotle, Plato, yeah. The actual philosophical thought, the history of Western philosophical thought was perceived by the public to be this lofty, esoteric thing that only these really, really high-level professors can understand. And Adler said, no, fuck that. Philosophy is everybody's business, because philosophy consists in every human being, including my little child, asking questions that every human being asks, by virtue of the fact that they're human beings, and by virtue of the fact that they're just awake, not even trying to answer any questions. We're always just, what is this? How does this work? What is that? And he thought that it was to the absolute detriment of society that philosophy had been considered that way, and that's one of the reasons that he put the great books canon together. My sense here, when it comes to education, that could lead to creating a citizenry that felt fulfilled, because people don't feel fulfilled in their lives. But then again, we're talking about very young people and what young person does feel fulfilled in their lives. But my sense is Adler got a lot of shit for the title Great Books of the Western World. And he was attacked for, you know exactly what I'm going to say. He was attacked for, why aren't there any black authors? Every single book.
I'm sorry, blacks did not write philosophy books until very recently.
Well, no. They kind of, but not in the West. But and also not what and even then they said, why wasn't Martin Luther King in this? It had nothing to do with the criteria for a great book was that it had to encapsulate almost all of the great ideas. And there were, oh God, I can't even remember. There was a ton of them. There was like more than 20. But it had to encapsulate almost all of the great ideas, and it had to comment on almost all of them. And there were very, very relative to all the authors that have ever existed, relatively few of those. And all of those just happened to be written by white men, as it were. But Bob Hutchins, who was helped out with the canonizations. There's the great books right there. Yeah, Bob Hutchins, who helped out with this. He wrote the foreword of the introduction. And both he and Adler said on many occasions, we are not saying that these are the only books worth reading. We are not saying that these are the only books that you should read in the context of this set. The recommended reading section was full of any kind of person that you could possibly think of. What he said was, these are the books that, from Plato all the way up to Nietzsche and a little bit beyond, and Ayn Rand and all that at the time, that was one conversation that was being had about the great ideas from many different perspectives throughout history, in a continuity all the way up to today. That's what he called the great books. It was called the great conversation, right? What he said was, some idiot that worked for, I think he worked for Donald Trump or something, said what Adler didn't say, which was, oh, show me the African Dostoevsky and I'll read him. But they don't have. Adler wasn't talking about the caliber of the author. He was talking about how relevant it was to the great conversation that was going on throughout philosophical history. He encouraged the Eastern world to compile their own great books of the East, the great books of the Eastern world, and then eventually we can talk to each other now that the communication gap has been filled, and eventually we can just have great books of the world. That's what he said. But here's the thing, though. Here's the thing that I want to suggest to you. That continuity of Western thought all the way up to today it certainly exists, and it certainly, in my opinion, it needs to be, not even just in my opinion, I mean, it needs to be required starting in high school if we want to make citizens and not, as Adler said, technicians.
Or slaves.
Or what?
Technicians. We just have slaves these days.
What's the difference when you're talking about when
you get right down to it? I mean, this is like these kids are taught this postmodernist theory where, again, why weren't there any black authors? It's like, shut the fuck up.
Well, but that was something that somebody said in the 60s. Well, no, it was a legitimate point, because they really thought that he was saying what that guy who worked for Trump said, was they didn't have we had the best authors and they didn't have any. They really thought he was saying that. That's kind of that comes from a genuine place too. I don't know about that. My deal is this. There is a continuity of Western thought in the way that I described, and this is what I offer to you to maybe challenge me on. I don't think there's a continuity of Western ideals. I don't think there's a continuity of Western values in the same way. Hello?
Yeah. You don't.
That was it. That was the whole thing.
You know, I certainly have some of the great books of the East on my bookshelf, and I've immensely enjoyed them. Again, listen, I want to get wrapping up, actually. I got to wake up really early tomorrow, but I really want to have you on again, because I think this has been a great conversation.
Yeah. Oh, I think one of the great difficulties of actually reminding us of the great culture of our past is little comments like this.
Whiteness is a form of racial oppression. Sure. The suggestion is that it is somehow possible to separate whiteness from oppression, and it is not.
This is what I'm talking about with cultural Marxism, with postmodernism. It's so much easier to tear things down than build things up. And there's a lot of people making a profit off of tearing things down right now. And so you can write a PhD paper accusing like this series of being racist and oppressive. Look, I've written PhD papers on this, okay? I've written feminist PhD papers that got A+. They were the most idiotic things I'd written, but they got A+. Because it's so much easier to tear things down. As long as you're tearing it down and you're signaling allegiance to this group, then that's all that matters. This very destructive, nihilistic form of thought seems to have taken over the universities. Not just the universities, it's taken over the media. It's a cancer growing throughout society. And that's the thing. There's a lot of human wreckage in the wake. You know, like I'm not saying that we need nobody, I think, is saying that we need some sort of dictatorial control system that forces monogamy, you can't force virtue, okay? You go back to Augustine. He pointed that out, that you should have a red light district because you can't force virtue. You need to teach virtue.
I just think that people need to, I think we need to be better at teaching people and guiding people toward having how to speak, how to listen, and how to have healthy relationships and conversations with people. I think putting anything else aside, those four things would do so much at the root of all of this. I don't think that, I think a lot of this animosity is
a waste of damn time because we're not doing constructive things.
Sure, and I think it comes from an inability. I mean, they don't see any other way to respond to how they feel about things. But on both sides, really, they don't understand any other outlet than outrage and anger and all of that stuff. And it would be better for all of us to solve that problem first and foremost.
Yeah, you know, guys, we do a lot more. It doesn't seem like we're doing anything, but we honestly do a lot more by talking, by teaching, by mentoring, sounds like such hippie bullshit, but by building things up instead of tearing things down. You know, like you don't accomplish anything by punching out an Antifa. You know, don't get me wrong. I kind of enjoy violence. I'd love to punch out an Antifa. It'd be a hell of a lot of fun, but it doesn't accomplish anything.
I am a certified, somebody mentioned California in the comments. I am a certified California tree-hugging hippie. So
I used to be a Californian too, and the one thing I do miss about not living in California is being able to engage with the opposition, because actually I find a lot more fun engaging with people I disagree with than people I agree with.
You know, California, one of the things I love about California is its diversity, and I don't mean racial diversity. That's cool too, but we're very racially diverse. We're very industrially diverse. I'm from the Bay Area, and I lived my whole life in the Bay Area, and I moved to the Central Valley. When I was doing Stand and Stand back in the day, I had just moved to the Central Valley, and it was such a great experience, and the culture was so different, because that's where all the agriculture is, right? And I'd gone up north to, like, up toward Eureka, was all that logging and whatnot, and it's very industrially diverse, and it's very politically diverse. People think that we're you know, we have this Democratic supermajority and all that bullshit, but the people that live here, very politically diverse. All the really hard left liberalism is in the Bay Area, where I'm from, Berkeley and all that, and then down in Los Angeles and all that, but north and middle, very conservative. I think that's cool.
We just make sure that the Bay Area people don't move to Texas and ruin that state.
They already, well, they're going there. They're going to Texas.
I know. I'm planning to get a big, like, I'm likely moving down there.
Oh, what are they going to ruin, Davis? They're cool. They're not going to.
No, they're going to vote for socialism, and then the Mexican. Like, listen, do you know how we took Texas from the Mexicans?
Yeah.
The dumb Mexicans invited a bunch of white farmers to come till their land because they didn't have enough Mexicans to do it. And then after there were enough white farmers, the white farmers said, hey, let's join the United States. Then you get the Mexican-American War. We win it. We take Texas. Now, the people in Texas, the whites in Texas are not having any children. The Mexicans are having lots of children. And a whole bunch of Democrats from California that just destroyed their state through taxation are going to do the exact same thing in Texas, and it's going to be blue. In 20 years, Texas is going to be blue. Mark my words.
Okay, but first of all, I have to bring this up. California is the 5th largest economy in the world. We're bigger than the UK. I don't think we have serious problems when it comes to housing prices. I'm a fucking poster child for that. We have very serious problems, but I don't think that California's been ruined through taxation, and I also don't think that white people's birth rates are going to drop to the point where Mexican children are going to annex Texas back to Mexico. I don't mean to sound disrespectful when I'm having that, but
are going to be a majority of the birth rates in about 3 years.
Okay, but when the Mexicans who come here look here. Oh, I know you want to go, and please tell me if I'm thinking.
In Canada the other day, he was here legally as an immigrant, and he couldn't speak a word of English. And, this is like me being a Roman and having a Celt in Rome that expects me to speak Celtish. It's like, no, speak Latin, motherfucker. We're the dominant culture.
I don't think they expect people to speak Spanish. They just can't speak English. But here's, not to belabor that point too much, but here's the thing: the people talk about the Mexican immigration. Not to get too much in that subject, but people talk about Mexican immigration to the U.S. in the same way that they talk about like the refugee crisis, of the Muslim refugee crisis in Europe, and it's not at all the same, because Mexico. This is something that people don't think about. Mexico and the United States are not radically different. People talk about assimilating, Mexicans assimilating the culture. Well, what do they need to assimilate to? Democracy? They come from a democracy. Christianity? They come from a majority Christian nation. All we're left with are general cultural idiosyncrasies. I don't think that that our two cultures and our two societies are radically different enough to where one would adversely affect the other. We definitely need to do more ESL stuff and more. There's things that we can invest in to make the problem turn to our advantage. That's what I'd like to see happen. I
see way too much of the blood of Montezuma in them. They just love murder.
Oh my goodness! I've never in my life.
Listen, I know.
Are you talking about the people that like day laborers?
The Aztecs, man, they were a bloodthirsty people, and now we killed the worst of them. We eliminated them from the gene pool, but we whites spent 1,000 years getting rid of the bloodthirsty ones in awesome ways. Look up Breaking on the Wheel. It's like, I wish we'd bring back that form of execution. We got rid of our criminals, and it took 1,000 years of eugenics to do it. The Mexicans were sacrificing their own children to torture deaths, 400 years ago, 700 years ago.
Okay, but in 2018, they're coming over here to work and buy iPads and do exactly the same things we are. Honestly, Dave, this might be a sharp point of
too cynical. You might be too optimistic.
No. I just don't think that anything that happened 400 years ago is in the conscious or subconscious mind of anybody today. I don't. There are things.
I don't know, dude. I still get an erection anytime I think about killing Celts.
I've never known a right?
Years ago.
I was trying to make a reference to my 400-year ago nationality, but I'm so fucked up when it comes to my genetics. I don't even know what that would be. But...
Oh, wait, listen.
Yeah.
I need to get going.
Yeah.
I hope you'll be on again.
No, it's a blast. Maybe you can come over to my channel one of these days and do something a little bit more like structure.
Absolutely. We were supposed to talk about the Manosphere of MGTOW and all that, but we kind of didn't get around to that.
That was a little bit more interesting.
Anyway, listen, Confused Matthew. He's got some solid videos. I've been watching the guy for years. Guys, go subscribe to him. Link down below. Luke, thank you for doing the art as usual. Do you have any final thoughts?
Oh, I did have a clip. Oh, yeah, the clip about philosophy. Here it is.
Love of wisdom. Man, that's better. Hey, that's kind of got a ring to it. Love of wisdom. What's that in Greek?
Love of wisdom in Greek. Philosophy.
Wonderful. Hey, subscribe to me, by the way.
Seriously, go check out his channel, guys. I'm just going to clear it out right now. Yeah, guys, don't fight Antifa, you dumb idiots.
It's not real. It doesn't exist. It's an invention of the media. Oh, topic for another time.
Yeah. Oh, that'll be a good one. All right. God bless all of you. Deus Volt. This is Aurini out.